That's how we own it.
What's up, family? It's your girl, Tamika D, Mallory.
And it's your boy, Mysonne, the General.
And we're your hosts of Street Politicians, the place where the streets and politics meet. Wow, there is so much happening, Mice. Like, I feel like, we're like, I don't know. It's like the world is just moving and there's so much stuff happening at one time. When we talked about the COVID precautions and staying 6 feet apart, you were saying that a lot of people are sort of just fighting to have some communication and contact. Like some people like people are fighting to maintain some level of normalcy of whatever is normal. But I was thinking to myself, it's not normal. Like things are just not normal. And, everything, I think, from politics to what's happening in our communities. Our dear sister, Leslie Redmond, who's been a guest on Street Politicians. She also was the immediate past president of the NAACP chapter in Minneapolis, one of the organizers there during George Floyd, even before George Floyd was murdered and after, with other activities that she has going on now. She has her campaign, Don't Complain, Activate. This is a powerful young sister. She's out there doing the work. And yet her brother, who was in his 30s, was killed just this past weekend. He was shot and killed by someone that more than likely looks just like us. And you have that happening. You have young people being killed. I think we just had another shooting where a child was harmed in New York. You had the school shooting where a young Black kid went and shot up a school. Some say
the kid in New York was a Bronx. A 10-year-old shot a 13-year-old in the leg. 10-year-old.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
10-year-old kid shot a 13-year-old.
Wow, a 10-year-old shot a 13-year-old. Again, just crazy things. And then you have the guy who shot people at a school, a young Black man. We don't often hear of major school shootings where Black kids are the ones shooting up a school, but his family talked about bullying, talked about, him being attacked. And of course, there's still no excuse for picking up a gun and taking the lives of a number of individuals, putting people in harm's way, causing that type of trauma. But yet there are some serious things happening in our society around the issues of bullying, the issues of trauma that have to be dealt with. And it's finding the balance between all of these things to still be able to maintain home and family and what have you. It's a lot happening.
It's a whole lot happening. Then you got Jon Gruden, who was the Los Angeles Raiders head coach, they found these emails from years ago, from about 2018, before 2018, of him just saying racist and homophobic and just like every level of white supremacy, he just possessed it. It wasn't, wow. He wasn't just mad at Black people. He didn't like the gay people. He didn't like nobody. Everything. He had an issue with everything.
That's usually how white supremacists are.
Yeah, that's usually how it works. So that's been something that came up.
You gotta be like me and eat your CBD candies. That's what I do. This is my CBD candies. I found this. I was riding and I was like, stop! There's a store that has CBD candies, and this is what I eat during my day. Keep my nerves together. This is supposed to be. This is legal, candy.
Okay.
Why are you looking at me like a crazy person?
It is. That's what you got.
Look,
you eating CBDs. Lord have mercy.
Get you some CBDs.
Don't fall asleep now.
It doesn't make you go to sleep. It takes the edge off.
The edge off.
You see? And it's supposed to be better than having a midday drink, which I am not above. But I'm working, so I don't want to have a drink. So I pulled out my candies, put my CBD in it. You got to get you some stuff. I'm going to get you some CBD candies. Let you see.
Probably not.
You never in your life smoke weed.
One time.
One time. Oh, that's right. You tell the story is when you was with DMX and you had a trip. You was tripping. Everybody has a trip like the first time they smoke weed.
Yeah, and that was done.
But then you was like, I never want to go back to it.
No, man. Wasn't for me.
Why? You just didn't like the feeling, or you didn't like the fact that
I didn't like none of it.
That experience.
I didn't like it. It wasn't for me.
But the thing is, you have been around marijuana in closed spaces, so you probably have felt high after that.
Yeah, I have. Like, the time we was in the studio and we had infused chicken.
That did happen to us.
And my eyelids felt like they weighed 200 pounds, and I was moving slow and lethargic. And I'm like, nah, this ain't for me.
But there's some people that just smoke weed all day and night, and I don't know how they
do it all day.
Friends.
They can't wait. You'll never catch them not smoking.
That is so true. I forgot about that story. But anyway, that's for another day. We have to have the people who were a part of that to be a part of the conversation, so it will not be like it's scandalous when we tell it by ourselves.
Yes.
Anyway, so I was thinking. How does the Democratic Party intend to win midterm elections without voting rights? I'm confused.
I don't think the Democratic Party intends to win anything.
No, they intend. Whether or not they will is something different, but they intend.
You can't. They can't be. No way. There's no way that they expect those good old people that they went up and voted, that they didn't promise things, that ain't got nothing else. People that saved their life, there's no way they expect those good old people to go out.
You sound like you had CBD candy. What?
Now, they know them good old people ain't going back out there to vote again after this. They know, come on now.
They're
gonna have to pull another rabbit out the hat for this one. But
I'm saying that voting rights specifically, let's just say I get your point, right? Yeah. I get your point. From our perspective, it's almost impossible to believe.
It's actually disrespectful.
It's actually disrespectful to even not just assume, but to request or demand of people that they vote. Right, that they vote for anyone who has not fulfilled any of the promises that were made, right? So that I agree with. I agree with you 100% on that. But I'm speaking of something different. I'm saying because what happens is, even when you say, I'm not engaging myself in this election, I don't believe, I don't trust, right? We have that position and that's okay. But the thing is, then you have to start listening to the people who are running against these folks. And when you start listening to them and understanding their agenda, it may encourage a lot of people to say, you know what, I'm going to the polls, right? I'm going to the polls. Now, I'm not saying everyone, and I'm certainly not talking about Ray Rays and Keishas and others, but I'm saying there are a group of people.
People want to kill me, man.
I know that.
I'm deaf to it.
I agree with you. Me too. I'm under attack about it all the time. And I still would make the same decision if I had to do it all over again. But I'm speaking of something even different. I'm saying there are some folks in our society that when approached and they are listening just because you're watching the news or you're at church or you're reading the paper, or you're in your community, when you hear the other side of what you may be looking at, and you're listening to someone who absolutely wants to take away your right to have an abortion, so your right to choose, and or they want to open more prisons, or they want to they want to close more schools, or take more funding from communities in order to invest more in punitive measures and support police, and they bleed the blue. When you hear that rhetoric and that tone, right, it may encourage you to say, I don't think that these other folks is worth a damn either, but I know I have to block this individual from becoming whatever it's senator or whatever they're voting for in their community. What I'm speaking of is now you're on your way to go vote and you find out that your vote is actually being suppressed by way of the laws in that particular state. Just forget it. I'm saying
get everything else. That alone.
Everything. They could have done it all right and this and that. I'm talking about voting rights.
It's going to the vote. The people that want to vote that still believe and say, you know what, I'm going to vote, and they get there and realize they can't.
The name has been purged. They need this, their ID has to be updated. They've been voting, knowing that you got elderly people who have been voting for years with one little letter misspelled on their identification versus their voting record, because when we were coming out of enslavement and we never had the appropriate records, a lot of people have continued through life with things that's not 100% accurate, but it's Mama Mabesley's information. You know what I'm saying? And so to have this situation where it seems like people are fumbling and the administration and others are fumbling on fighting as hard as hell to get voting rights accomplished. I'm trying to figure out, when you already failing at getting the policy in place, and then you're not even giving people who might just still want to be with you the ability to go to the polls. Like they can't be planning on winning anything.
They don't plan on winning. I'm trying to tell you, they don't have any plan on winning. They just at this point, it's like it's just going through the motions, and it's disappointing because you want, as somebody who wants things to be good, you want things to be right. You actually pray on it and all that. You want to believe that there is some side or some individuals that are in power to some certain degree that actually want to do right, that are willing to do whatever necessary to do right. So I'm not saying I don't believe they don't want to do it. I think they haven't come to the stage in the mind frame of that they have to do whatever necessary to do right. Mm-hmm. Not doing right is just not an option. I'm not going to allow you to delay justice and delay things that are right. I have to do whatever it is within my power to make things right. And that's, even though we hope for that, that's not what we are. So, if people can't even go to the polls, and then the people that ain't never going to the polls, and the people on the opposite side got people going to the polls, and they reinvigorate.
Going to the polls. They don't care.
And they ain't going for you, champ.
They going to the polls for their own agenda, and their agenda is either they're going to get some things that they want done that oppress all the time communities, or just stop that community from being able to progress in any way. They can't gain any more ground into, sort of breaking down systems of oppression. And so they vote for different reasons. They vote because you might be somebody who maybe you're not as radically conservative as I want you to be, but I at least know that you're not going to support a progressive agenda.
That's right. So
we have people that are on both sides that think similarly, but I think the issue with us as Black people at this point is that we are no longer in a position to just, like, we've already stopped some of
we can't just keep kikiing. We just, we're not, the shucking and dry kiki and go along and get along, that shit is over. So, we're just in a different space. So
that's how we own it.
We've got like a really, really dope show today. 2 amazing guests that are going to take us deeper. I'm all about going deeper and getting deeper into like who I am and where I need to be, and aligning all of what is going on inside. There's a lot happening with all of us. And we've already talked about at the beginning of the show, just the stresses and the pressures, and just how life is just not what has been considered normal. And I guess even what was normal should not have been accepted as normal. We're going to be learning from 2 people today, really, really learning. And so we're right off of the heels of International Mental Health Awareness Day, just this past Sunday. And our
That's a lot. I didn't even know they had something like that.
They do. They have a month. They have a day. There's a lot of stuff, you got to be learned. That's why we're about to learn.
I'm here to learn.
We're going to learn from our two guests today, Anita Kopacz and also Syntyche Franchella. I love her name. I can't wait for us to talk about it.
These people got dope names. So I hope they got the dope energy, because I need to get my mind right.
Well, we're going to bring Anita into the studio, if you will, and find out what type of dope energy she has right now.
That's how we own it.
So we have a new friend on Street Politicians today. We always joke about the fact that all of the guests that we have come up here doing such powerful work, our friends, people we know, people who we admire. And this sister is someone who I absolutely admire and have been watching her. And, we've all introduced one another to some really incredible people. Mysonne, you introduced me to Charlemagne some time ago. And now Charlemagne has introduced us to this wonderful woman who is our guest, Anita Kopacz, who is a spiritual psychologist and a sex therapist. And I'm all about that. I'm getting ready to get all into the details. She also just published her best-selling book, Shallow Waters. And we are sort of like siblings under the Black Privilege Publishing brand, with Charlemagne the God as I guess he's like the boss man. I tell him he's boss all the time. And she also just finished a real deep mental health weekend, a spiritual, a mental health awareness conference that Charlemagne just held. And so there's a lot going on with Anita, and I'm so grateful that you took a little bit of time to come on Street Politicians and talk to my son and us and me today.
It is such a deep honor for me to be here with both of you. The work that you do for our community, I'm tearing up now. You could tell I'm already emotional. The work that you do for our community is so important. And it is just such an honor for me to be sitting here right now.
I just love the feng shui of the it just gives you healing vibes. Like you could just tell, like everything, your hair, it goes with the comforter and the wall. It just looks, everything is just beautiful, man. We appreciate you. Thank you for having us on our show. Thank you for having us.
Look, you got him like all twisted around, but that's all good. I just want to drop this little note in to say that before you and I ever laid eyes on one another, we were already supporting one another's books, and just supporting, and by sharing content and being there to say, hey, sis, love to you. And so this idea that people need relationships that span over years in order to support one another, I think we've debunked that just by already having a sisterhood from a distance. And so that's what makes today incredible. And I have been listening and reading and, really deeply paying attention to you and your spiritual advice and support. And I already see why Charlemagne and folks like Angela Rye and others are attracted to you. And so tell us a little bit about the work that you do and why you do it.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I always share this first. I believe that the Black woman is God. And so I do everything that I can to bow to Black women and to support Black women and to support those who are supporting Black women. And so that is already just a part of my mission. I was the editor-in-chief of Heart and Soul for 5 years. And so within that, I was able to get a lot of information disseminated out into our communities about different ways of getting health and wellness into our hands. And what I do as a spiritual psychologist and a certified Tantra coach, sex therapist, I work with people, mostly people who have experienced sexual trauma. And the interesting thing with sexual trauma, especially within our community, is that pretty much everyone is touched by it, because if you haven't experienced it, your mom has, or your grandmother has, or your great grandmother has, or your father has, you know, like it's very prevalent in our communities. And what happens is that trauma can be passed down through the generations, which we all know this. And so sometimes you can be walking around with the symptoms of having been raped or molested, but you're like, wait, I haven't been molested. Like, why am I feeling this way? Why can't I connect? And it's because it's happened somewhere down the line. And so with the work that I do a lot to try to normalize the healing of it, the speaking of it, especially for men. I've talked to Charlemagne about this as well, that, you know, 1 in 6 men have been molested between the ages of 1 and 18, 0 and 18. And that's reported. You know, most people are not reporting that shit.
Right.
You know, I forgot to ask if I'm able to.
We say shit, damn, every curse word we say.
Yeah, we cuss here. We cuss.
Okay, good.
It
I'm
makes
home. I'm home.
Sound good. It gets the point across.
Exactly. And it's 1 in 3. So it's 1 in 3 for women. And so it's very prevalent in our communities. And well, that's actually not even just our community. That's for everyone.
Okay. Well, I was sitting here. When did you notice? Because this is not like to me, right? When I'm listening to you and the understanding that you have, I don't think this is something that you just go to school to study. I think there's like a calling, is a feeling, like when you call yourself a healer and all this, like when did you feel like this was something that you were supposed to be doing?
Yes. So when I was around 18, I started hearing voices, right? And what most people would say is like, oh, she's crazy, you know, like go to, you know, like I would have to go to an institution. But what happened was that I started listening to what the voices were saying and when I would hear them. And my thing, I was actually just sharing this at the Mental Wealth Expo with Charlemagne. I was sharing that I feel like Black privilege to me means that we have the access to the voice of God. And a lot of times we think we're going crazy because all of this information is coming to us and we don't know what to do with it. And so for me, when I was 18, I start hearing these voices. The voices I was hearing, it was not the voice of God. These were not good voices that I was hearing. And so what I realized was that when I would walk by people, the voice would get louder and then I'd pass and the voice would go away. And so I'm like, wait, am I hearing what people are saying or are thinking? And so I started asking them. I was 18. I didn't have very much discernment. And so what would happen was that people would get freaked out because I would tell them what they were thinking. And they were like, how did you know? And the last person that I did it to was this older man. And he's like talking to me and smiling. And all I could hear was, I don't know where my wife and kids are. And I was like, look, I know you don't know where your wife and kids are. And he grabbed me up and he was like, where are they? What do you mean? You know, like I was feeling like I was going to be attacked. And so I like ran home, I ran upstairs and I just started praying to God. I was like, listen, if this is supposed to be a gift, I don't want it. I can't handle it. And just if there's something that you feel like I might be able to handle, show me how to do that, but please take these voices away.
Wow.
And so I woke up, those voices were gone. And then I had this dream that I was like throwing rocks and reading them for people, which that's more than 20 years ago. So there wasn't really very many people doing those type of things around. So I didn't know who to ask. So I just started doing it. And so that's how it started. I started giving readings to people. And what I realized is that I didn't know what tools to give them to continue on their healing journey. And they were getting addicted to reading. I was just like, okay, so that's when I decided to get my master's in spiritual psychology.
Were you labeled as crazy, or were you always, were people just clear in your family and your close friends that this is really a gift?
So it, with my close friends, they were very clear that it was a gift. It was the people who would label me as, and what I heard, it wasn't necessarily crazy. They just were like, they called me a demon because they were like, how could you know this? And this was people who would come to me for advice. And then I would tell them something that they wouldn't think anybody would know. And they would just say that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's, the work you do, you both do, it like comes from a place where you have to do it. Mm-hmm. No matter, it doesn't matter what the fuck anyone is saying. It's like, I still have to wake up and do it. And that's what would happen, is like, it didn't matter what anyone was saying. Even though I was so young, it was like, okay, I just have to, because it's a call.
Yeah.
It's a calling.
That's amazing. Just listening to you, I've always felt like I had like certain, like you said, like when I doing this work, I didn't feel like it was a choice. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like I just felt, ever since a kid, I always felt like I had to help people. I always felt like I had to be the one that stood up against the bullies. I had like, so you just, as you grow, you realize that certain things just lead you to your calling. So just thinking about this, is that what, I haven't read your book, and I'm just so like, I have to read it now. Like I'm just so enamored, like I definitely have to get this book. So what is the book based on? What is it?
Yes. So the book is actually about Yemeya, and Yemeya, or Yemoja, she is a goddess in the Yoruba pantheon of gods and goddesses. She's a Black mermaid from Nigeria. And around that same time, when I was 18, I learned that Yemeya was the goddess that watched over our ancestors as they went over the Middle Passage. So there was a Black mermaid that watched over. That's what is said. She watched over us as we went over the Middle Passage, and watched over the souls that were either thrown overboard or decided to jump overboard.
Right.
So when I learned of that, I was like, okay, who is this goddess? And why don't we all know who she is? And so the first time Charlemagne read the book, he loved it, and he was like telling me about it. And I was like, well, you know who Yemeya is, right? And he was like, oh, the main character of your book. I was like, no.
No, this is a thing.
She's a goddess. And he was like, I've never heard of her. And I was like, I bet you have.
Right.
I was like, have you, do you remember the poem from Love Jones? He straight up, like, he knew the poem by heart. He starts saying the poem, right?
Wow.
And then he goes, oh, are you Yemeya? Hell no, you must be Oshun, right? Like, he was like, oh my gosh, I've been saying her name. Like,
know what we were saying.
I had no idea what I was, who I was talking about. And then, Beyonce came out with Black Parade, saying her baby sister, repping Yemeya. And have this bright light coming in, but it's okay.
You look beautiful. You look, it's working.
It's working. Okay.
It's working.
All right. So it's like she has been here this whole time. I mean, she has been here. The first written accounts of Yemaya, Yemoja, were I believe the 1500s or 1400s, when the first enslaved Africans came over.
Mm-hmm.
But the information was passed down orally before, so we don't even know how old,
how long,
and
right?
how long these parables have been around.
Mm-hmm.
And the representation of mermaids, we know, are like white, redhead, blonde, like that's what we
and it's all about, like, I don't know, sensuality more than it is spirituality.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the story started coming through, so to your question about the, the healing that's in it,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, so there's words that are written, but the intention behind it all is, so this is my love letter to Black women, and it is so that we remember who we really are.
Mm-hmm.
We were cut off from our African spirituality, from our mother tongue, from all of these things as daughters and sons of the diaspora. But if we quiet ourselves and go inside, we have that connection because we are the ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
We are literally made from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book is my activation of that. And for me, it was my healing of my ancestral wounds from chattel slavery. And it was intense. You've written a book, Tamika, you know the process.
And so has my son. And it's insanity. It's insanity. He's actually writing another one right now.
Oh, so it's, the process, like it is an emotional process.
It's emotional. It let you know you're crazy because you're like, who came up with this idea? And it takes on so many different shapes and forms. And you find yourself, I know that you are probably just like we are, perfectionists, like wanting to get it right, wanting to make sure that the information you're putting in the world is real and true and true. Exactly. And true, which is a whole different thing, because now you've got to decide between what's the old, the folk tale that we tell in a family to make a point versus what is true, that will actually, will not just sound good, but will like be good. Like for the soul. And so that's it's a lot that goes into writing. And I suggest that people do it because it disciplines you. It also gives you an opportunity to learn and see yourself coming to life within this document. And so there's so much about it, but it definitely is for insane people. Jamel Hill told me one day, people who write books are crazy. I said, oh, is that me? Because I've been trying to figure out, what is it?
That's right.
That's right. It is a level of insanity. And just being a musician and writing music is sort of always like writing a book, right? Because it's always, when you write albums and you write songs, is from self-reflection. It's ideas that you come up and you want them to be perfect. Like I find myself in the studio. So writing a book is just a longer, elongated process of writing music. Like, right. So I go in the studio and I put down lyrics, and then I'm like, this don't sound right. I got to change this a little bit. And I don't like this beat. Let me put this ad lib here, and until it just sounds all the way perfect. And then you still have critiques, and you're like, all right, well, I just got to get rid of it, because people be like, look, you got to put this out by now.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And the thing about music that's really amazing is that it's one of the avenues, or I would say channels, that connect us to the divine, right? Like we can literally use music to connect us to the divine. And so I have so much respect for anybody who knows how to do that. Music for me is to dance to. Like I can dance to it. I can't sing or write songs.
You can dance to it. Well, speaking of dancing, I would say the other thing about finishing a book, finishing the project, because people probably listen to us talk about all of the emotional, ins and outs, and they're like, well, why the hell would I want to do it? But I would say that the finishing product is like a beautiful orgasm. That's the way I saw finishing my book. I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Yes.
And
Lord have mercy.
Like, why did I have a whole bunch of
Lord have mercy. Lord
I'm talking to the sex therapist. I'm over here giving my truth.
That's right. Well, that brings us to the next topic.
True. So you said that you deal with sexual trauma. And I have this question that I've been wanting to ask somebody for a long time. Would you say, and this may be on a small scale, but let me just go with me for a second.
Okay. Would
you say that the denial of truth within sex is a trauma, a form of trauma? I'll explain to you what I mean. Many women don't really experience sexual pleasure, right? A lot of women, and I'm well beyond that now in my life, and in my life at this stage, but I know a lot of women who lie their way through because they have been told that their only responsibility or their only their role is to please. Don't worry about being pleased. And therefore you have to lie, fake, do whatever to just get the man through it and to give yourself, but never to actually receive the pleasure and the desire that you also, or be able to reach your desires and what have you. And I wonder, is that something that we've passed down? Is it all communities? Is it something Black women learned? Like, what is that? Because to me, it feels like trauma when I hear so many women say, and I also have done it, say, we're faking it through just to be able to get the man off and let him get away from me, basically.
Yeah, that's colonized sexuality for sure. Because there, if you think of Tantra and even ancient Egyptian Tantra, that pleasure is for both, right? And Tantra is actually means the balance between the masculine and the feminine. And, a lot of people are like, oh, it means like the different sexual positions, but that's what the meaning is the balance between that. And when you study Tantra, you first work with yourself. So I work with women to be able to find pleasure themselves. And you are so absolutely right. I mean, there were so many women that I talked to who had never even experienced an orgasm, whether it was with themselves or with a man, or with another woman, or whatever, their preference is. And so it has absolutely been passed down from, I would say, any patriarchal society. It has been, like we have been there to please the man. And there definitely are a lot of people like waking up to it. But there was just last week, there was this whole TikTok thing that went down that was like, this guy had asked women, what does sex feel like? And all of their answers were like, oh, it's like the itch that you can't scratch, like all these things that sex is horrible to women. And we are literally here to experience pleasure. Like that is what we are here for. And most of us run away from it. Most of my life, I ran away from it. The reason I'm even in this work is because when I was 7, I was molested. And so most of my adult life, I was scared of pleasure because for me, my experience as a child was that it was very pleasurable. And the last time that it happened, I had asked the man to do it to me. And so I, in my head, made it my fault. I was like, oh my gosh, like I like this and, like I can't tell anyone and like I'm asking for it now. And like it was just this whole confusing thing. And a part of my healing was to really look at a picture of my 7-year-old self, and I'm a baby. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, I'm just like, okay, I was so young. This was not my fault, And even though we know that when we've gone through it, it's hard to make that separation because I am Anita, right? Like, I still feel like Anita. And, but like to actually look and be like, oh yeah, I was a baby. I was a baby. And this wasn't my fault. And that is a part of why sexual crimes are so nuanced, because even someone who is raped and they're like, oh, but you got wet. Your body is going to make you wet to protect you. Doesn't mean you're turned on all the time. Wow. And so it's just such a nuanced.
Wow.
It is. It's very nuanced. Just listening to that. So that's traumaful. A lot of do you deal with men, a lot of men, or more? You probably deal with more men, or what do you think you?
I deal with more women, but I've worked with a few men, and I feel like for men, they have a whole nother thing having to deal with society. And I think the work that Charlemagne is doing with the Mental Wealth Alliance and normalizing emotions, hugging. There was this powerful moment at the end of the men and mental health panel where all the men came together and gave each other a group hug. And it was just so powerful to see that, because as the divine feminine is rising, we're learning what the divine masculine is, because all of us, men and women, have been, I would say, victim to the toxic masculinity. And so it's really beautiful to see people who are ready to step into that, right? Like, step into those roles. And as we learn and as we talk about it, sharing it. Because when we share, I mean, I know you both know this because you're always sharing.
No, but I'm being educated.
Yeah, I'm learning.
Yeah. But as we share and as we heal so many people with us. So when I heal my issues with sexual molestation, and I actually say it and speak on it, right? And say things like, at this one event, I spoke about how, my experience was pleasurable. And this woman walked up to me and she was like, if someone held a gun up to my head and asked me to admit that when I was a child, that my experience of sexual molestation was pleasurable, I still would have said no. She's like, the fact that you said that, and that was her experience, but she was like, I would never admit to that. And I was actually only able to say that because when I was 10 years old, I was watching Oprah and she said that. And I remember I hadn't told anybody what had happened to me yet. And so when Oprah said it, my whole body started sweating. I was like, oh, everyone's going to know she's talking about me, But what that moment did for me was like, oh, if Oprah can go through that and still be on this stage and still be such a support to everyone,
right?
I can keep going. I can do this.
My son, you go ahead first, and then I'll.
No, I was just sitting here thinking, there's so many different layers. There's levels of molestation that men have dealt with, like the young boys that we've dealt with, and we never considered it as being molested, right? And so when you
got lucky, your teacher, you fucked your teacher.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So when you have these conversations and you admitting like, okay, we actually liked it, and that's why, and I think that was the part of that differentiated what y'all described as being molested and what we described, right? Because we felt like, exactly like you said, we got lucky. We scored with an older woman. I was 12 and 13 and she was like 21.
Exactly.
Or I was 8 and 9 and she was like 18 and 19.
Yep.
So those things for us was things that we bragged about and we talked about amongst each other, and that we never didn't think that it affected us. But we became so hypersexual, you know, after those things. Like sex became like so focused in our mind that we didn't even realize that the trauma that came from that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that's every relationship and everything became about sex. That was at the forefront of everything.
Yep.
You know, we never really realized those things. So just listening to that and you able to, because I never heard that interview that Oprah did. So this was the first time that I've ever heard a woman admit that when they were being molested at a young age, that they actually enjoyed it and they wanted it. And that was never really something that I've actually ever heard.
Yeah.
So that was just enlightening just to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so let me see here now.
I just want to ask one question. This is going to be a debate because me and Tamika have this conversation all the time. Is there a such thing as toxic femininity?
Heck yeah.
Okay. Well, a lot of people don't seem to believe that that's a thing.
I never disagree with you that I think that it does exist.
But I've never heard it explained and I had a theory so let me just break down my theory that me and Tamika had this theory, right? And I know you're probably not going to agree with me. So let me just give that before I say it. So I believe that masculinity and femininity in itself can't be toxic. Right? I think that for me, that when masculinity is perfect and femininity is perfect, I think that there's an excess of something else that comes into you that's toxic, right? I think in men, right? For me, is what I realize is energy between men and women have combined energy. There's a masculine and a femininity in both of us. Yes. I think the toxicity is when the opposite is more dominant. Right? I think for me, when I watch a lot of men that I feel are toxic, and it's not being disrespectful, or I watch women that I feel are toxic, I think they exhibit more male traits than they do women traits. When I see a lot of men that I think are toxic, I think they exhibit more women traits than they do men traits. Okay. That's just a observation that I've had. So I don't think either one of those can be toxic masculinity or femininity. I just think it's the opposite. I think when I see men doing things, I say that's more toxic femininity to me. And when I see women doing things, I say that's more toxic masculinity to me.
But the debate comes from me, and this is what my son and I always talk about, I believe it is his unconscious desire to associate negativity with the female side in a man, rather than to take responsibility for the fact that some men are just toxic as fuck, period, right? But instead to be able to say, well, now that's because you got too much feminine energy and that feminine shit is whack. Like that's what I'm trying to say. I understand that you may not feel that you're saying that.
No, what I'm trying to say is the reason why that can't, in my opinion, is that I'm saying the same thing on the other side about women. I'm not suggesting. So I'm not saying, and I'm saying if I watch a woman that I feel like has too much masculine energy and it's coming off, I'll be like, you're doing too much masculine shit and that shit is whack.
But what I'm saying is that there are people who exist in the world, right? There can be a woman who's extremely feminine and she just argues all the time and just wants to fight every day and, doesn't trust and can't believe. How does that just get associated with a man? Like, that's just some toxic shit about the woman. And I'm not saying it's toxic femininity because I'm not an expert in this area. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that I wouldn't sit here and say, this chick is just toxic. Every time she comes around, she's starting problems, gossiping, I'm just thinking of things that people automatically classify with women,
right.
Gossiping, going back and forth between people, starting stuff, and therefore there's fights that's happening, or she's, whatever those things are. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, that's because she's got more male traits.
Right.
She just might be dealing with some toxic feminine shit.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I think what just like came up for me from what you both were saying, Mysonne, am I saying your name right?
You're saying it perfect, and that's beautiful. That usually doesn't happen.
Awesome. When you said you don't believe that masculinity and femininity can be toxic, that actually made sense to me, because when you think about any element in the world, water, fire, right? Even spirit, we can't really say that they're toxic. It's either, right? Like water, we can drink it and it can be life for us, but it can also drown us, right? And so, or fire, it can warm us or burn us, right? And so this is actually the first time that I'm thinking about it in this way. So maybe you're right that there is not a such thing as masculinity or femininity being toxic, but there are people who are super out of balance. And, there are women who are amazing women who are very masculine. So I don't know if it's in that way, but I feel like they're just not connected to spirit.
Yeah. I think it's all in how you use it. And I hate that we have to actually wrap up, but I do think it's all
I know this is supposed to be like a 2-hour special, man.
I know it has to be. We have so many folks that we've got to bring back on our show. And you certainly have joined that crowd of those who have to come back so we can dig deeper into things, because there's a lot that, I think that most of us have been afraid to approach, that you are headfirst in.
Diving in like a mermaid.
Yeah, you're diving in like a mermaid. And I understand that it's time for us to bring our communities along. We've been in survival mode for so long that we haven't even been able to get to the development of so many elements of ourselves that can make us a stronger community. And that's not any fault of our own, but it's what white supremacy does.
It is,
what it is. And so Anita, first of all, I just want to say thank you, because your time is super valuable. You probably say, well, no, I'd love to be, I understand, but
I love to be here.
You should either be resting, reading, working, laughing,
healing
the sun, healing your own issues and needs. But I want to thank you for what you're putting out in the world. And I'm so glad that the stars and moons and all the things aligned that would bring you into our lives, so that we can ask these safe questions of, what is toxic femininity, masculinity? Does it exist? What does it mean? Because that's a real soft or a real vulnerable discussion, if you will, within our communities that we're trying to work out, because I think this idea of toxicity in general has been used to divide us and to separate us, rather than us figuring it out so we can come closer together. So I appreciate you, Mysonne, for bringing that up today.
Yes, I appreciate you for, always debating and always being, we don't usually agree a lot, we just, we disagree on a lot of things, but we agree on principle, we agree on our mission, and we're aligned in that. So, it's dope even being able to converse about these things. But you, Anita, are amazing. Your energy, as soon as I came on, I was like, this is some energy is here, man. Like, it's celestial energy, man, So I appreciate you. Continue to do what you do. I got to get that book now because I got to get in tune.
Shallow Water.
Yeah. Go get the book if you haven't got it, because I'm going to get it.
Yes, go get it. This is my published sibling from Black Privilege Publishing. Shout out to Charlemagne the God for bringing us together. Anita Kopacz, thank you for being with us. And we are definitely going to have you back.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Peace out, sis.
Thank you.
That's how we own it.
Wow. Like, wow. Like, Anita is just amazing. Like, soon as she came on the screen, the whole, like, you could just feel that some people are just born to do things, you know, and just listening to her story, you can just tell that this was her calling. This is her purpose. You just feel comfortable just having a conversation with her. You feel like everything she says is right. Like, you just shaking your head, like you find yourself just engulfed in what she's doing. Yeah. So that's amazing. So I don't even know.
High energy.
Yes, very high energy, man. It just illuminates. If Syntyche is anywhere near Anita, then we gonna probably have one of our best shows ever. You know, so I'm looking forward to what's going on with Syntyche.
That's how we own it.
So off of the heels of Mental Health Awareness Day, 10/10, which was just this past Sunday, and we know that Charlemagne the God hosted a mental health awareness weekend. There are many people, including our last guest, Anita Kopacz, who were a part of the activities that were held during this weekend. And I think we all agree that it is time for Black folks, particularly, to really dig into our mental health and spiritual wellness. And so we have been joined by another guest today, someone who we're just sort of getting acquainted with and getting to learn more about what she is doing in New York, in the country, and of course, in the world. Syntyche Franchella is her name. She has such a beautiful name. And we're so happy to have on Street Politicians this bold sister who is a yoga instructor and coach and the founder of the first Black-owned yoga studio in Queens. She also has a new initiative called the Man-Child Project. And we're about to learn so much about what Syntyche does every single day in the space of mental health, healing, and awareness. Thank you so much for being with us today, sis.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here. So grateful. Thank you.
Yes, man. That name. See, you know, I'm a stickler for names because my name being Mysonne, I didn't always love my name. Like, people always messed it up. I used to get in fights. They called me my son and all type of stuff. So I want to ask you that first. Like, did you always just love your name? Because it's a dope name now. As an adult, when you listen to it,
amazing. Like,
have you always thought it was amazing?
I hated it.
Okay. Thank you.
So first of all, I remember I have this distinct memory of sitting outside the bathroom door. My mother was a nurse, and she was in the bathroom. She had just come from work. I'll never forget it. And I was like, "Mommy, tell me again how to spell my name." And she was in the bathroom, and I'm outside the door, and she was like, "S," and I'm writing it, and I distinctly remember it. And she would always say, "and the accent on the E." So I appreciate your story, because even though folks may say it right, oftentimes they spell it wrong. So same, like, you know, seeing your name and it's like, but that's not my name, you know? And
that's a whole other thing. Spelling it properly.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you my name story. My name is Tamika, and in the projects, everybody's name was Tamika. So I was like, "Ma, you went and named me the blackest name you could come up with," until I read in a book with African names that it actually means a princess, an African princess. So we all have a story around these names.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Tamika, princess, queen, all that.
I never even know that. Okay, you got a little history with it.
But it's still hood. It's still Tamika.
100.
So tell us about what it is that you do. Like, what is your expertise? What are you comfortable? Break it down to us.
So in the beginning, I was an educator. I started as a classroom principal, became a dean, worked my way up assistant principal, then was an AP in the city, and then came to the suburbs and thought I landed, right? Like, I had the parking spot, I had the 6 figures, and I was good, right? Like, I got tenure, you know what I mean? And then I got diagnosed with PTSD. And I knew what it was. It was me walking around in this abnormal world, not being able to process my shit. You know, between the school shootings and going back into my building, and then there's lunch, right? Like you hold that, right?
Wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's deep. I mean, that requires a moment. Like I almost burst out in tears just now, because that is such a truth for our young people, that you can be in the morning time with your friend today, maybe two, and then another day the friend is gone, there's a shooting, something happened, and the school system just goes right on back to normal.
Or the school shooting is in Connecticut.
Yes.
You have teachers running to your office saying, I have to go. There was a shooting at my kid's school.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I thought, well, I'm not in New York City anymore, right? So, verdicts are happening all over the world, right? And I'm supposed to act like leaving my son at the bus stop is normal. And it was one day where he was at the bus stop and I parked like up the hill, and I just watched him because I was afraid. And he got on the bus and I went to work. I didn't think I was gonna cry. And I was like, this shit is not normal. We're not supposed to live like this. I don't want to talk about progress reports. You know what I mean? I want to know, is my son gonna come home on that fucking school bus today?
That's right.
And so, all of that fueled my PTSD. And finally, after my father transitioned, I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this no more. I'm not gonna kill myself taking care of other people's kids. I can't even feel safe about my own life, let alone my son. And I left, and I opened up a yoga studio in South Queens. And it was, as my understanding, little did I know at the time, the first Black-owned yoga studio in South Jamaica, Queens, which it's my old stomping ground. That's where I grew up. And so I opened up the yoga studio, then the studio transitioned, and then COVID happened. And then it's like, the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, well, now what do? I have no pension. I have no tenure. And everything stopped. And then everything hit me. Like I was having physical reactions to all the stress that I had been carrying, all the stress we all have been carrying individually and collectively. And then I was just like, I have to do something or I'm gonna lose it. And I struggled with, I'm a mom, my son is now 19, and I struggled with the story that I felt was the in-between. The in-between between so much tragedy and struggle and success and excellence. And being an educator, my kids came back and like, yo, miss, I took the sanitation test and I got the job, or, I went into law enforcement, or I'm going into the military, or I got married, these are my kids, and now I'm doing this thing and I'm doing that thing. And all of these seemingly ordinary stories that were untold. And I just wanted my son to be able to scroll through the internet and see ordinary greatness, which is really extraordinary shit. You know what I mean? And it wasn't there. So I was like, I'm gonna do it. So I called some friends and I was just like, let's just do this man-child project. And it was called the Man-Child Project because that's what he was when he was born. His name is Judah. He came out with 2 fists, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, he's the man-child. And that's what we did. And we just reached out to a couple of friends and was like, yo, just share your excellent story. Like if it's ordinary, it's extraordinary. Like, brother, you here? Like, are you kidding me? You brushed your teeth today? You winning, my nigga. You know what I mean?
That's right.
You washed your ass? 100%. Because it bees like that sometimes. And I really wanted to just create space to just celebrate that and see it regularly. You know what I mean? Like, I had this vision, like when you looked up hashtag Black excellence, like all you saw was like 1 million Black men, like motherfuckers would just have to just fucking put the phone down because they couldn't stop scrolling. You know what I mean? Like that shit. That's what I wanted.
Wow, that's dope. Just celebrating a Black man for being a Black man. No particular accolades, just being Black and alive.
Yeah, and thinking about life and thinking about not thinking about life. Like, you here? Like, what is your story, sir? Thank you so much for sharing. What are your dreams, sir? Thank you so much for sharing.
Wow, it's a lot to process. I mean, you know, I'm a daughter of a Black man. I have Black brothers. I have, you know, my Black uncles. I've worked with many Black men, and then I have a Black son. And of course, I've had Black men as my partners. And I feel like my whole life is about Black men. A lot of people don't think that. You know, there are people who, just because I dare to speak to the power of Black women and or talk about our issues, and of course to speak about what Black men do to harm us, because we are harmed oftentimes by the people who are closest to us, it makes folks say, oh, you know, you're a male basher. But the truth is, I spend probably 80% of my life focused on the needs of Black men, because I believe that the strength of the Black man is the strength of our families. And so listening to what you're saying, I feel like that's exactly what we need to be doing more of, which is to pour into Black men, because there are not enough spaces where Black men are not just celebrated, but that they can just be themselves without having to put on for the world. There's not enough spaces.
And if I could just, you know, make an offering to that comment, you know, part of the mental health piece, especially, let me make an I statement, the struggle that I had that I was also working through is that the both are true, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I am a daddy's girl, was a daddy's girl, you know what I mean? And love my father beyond words. There are no utterances, you know what I mean?
That's right.
And he was profoundly abusive. Both were true, you know what I mean? And I would want him a part of the project. I would want to have shared his story, him to share his story, because oftentimes that's the struggle, like thinking that it has to be one or the other. You know what I mean? Like, brother, I can celebrate you and you can go heal that shit. You know, you can celebrate me and I'm gonna go heal that shit.
Right.
And not waiting for this point of arrival before I celebrate them, before we celebrate them, because the moment is now.
The moment is now.
Yeah, I got this one of episodes that y'all got me here thinking too much. I don't be needing to think this much, but it's a lot, you know, just listening. You know, I've been watching Charlemagne along this mental health thing. He's been very intentional about it. He's somebody that I respect and I see as a good friend. So I listen to it. But today, just listening to my Black sisters just talk about it in a different light, it tapped in a little more, you know. So what do you think we need to do to close this wellness gap? What is the wellness gap to you? What is it?
So the Healing Station was created to really bridge the gap between what we know and what we think we know, and then what else is out there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we not from here. Like, that's really the premise. We not from here. This is not our native tongue. We not wearing our native clothes. We don't have our native smells. And there is a genuine energetic disconnect. We on occupied territory. All of that shit impacts our nervous system. It really, really does, right? And so the Healing Station is about honoring Indigenous Black culture, people of culture, right? Honoring that. And then closing the wellness gap by sharing information through trainings, through workshops about what it is our people actually did. So we look at what some may call alternative medicine or alternative forms of treatment, but we take that shit back. It's not alternative. It's actually quite natural. And it's an option, right?
Yeah.
So you want to take Prozac, but guess what? You could use a piece of pyrite. You know what I mean? Like, you want to hold your crystal to get your peace? You could do that. You could take a tablet. You could walk barefoot. You could go for a hike. You know what I mean? You can go see that psychiatrist, but really giving access and information to persons of color, to persons of culture, so that we can heal ourselves. You know, and then the other piece is offering scholarship, whether it's for the different trainings that we offer or different trainings within the wellness community, so that people of color can have those careers, right? Like a Rolfer. I don't know. Have you ever heard about Rolfing?
No.
No. Teach us.
So Rolfing,
learn on Street Politicians.
It's amazing. So Rolfing is an energy working, right? So you heard of acupuncture.
Of course.
Right? So it's not similar, but just pull back a little bit, and you're talking about energy and how energy moves through the body. Mm-hmm. And Rolfing helps move energy through the body by pressing into the deeper tissues, into the fascia, and literally you can heal trauma out of the body. Literally, you wake up different. Rolfers make anywhere between 175 to 350 for an hour to a 90-minute session.
Wow.
What would a training look like from a brother that got released or a sister that got released, where they could go through that 6-month, 9-month training and take that shit right back into their community and have their own wellness set? Do you see what I'm saying? That's that shit. Because the wellness industry is our industry, because we're paying other people to get ourselves well. Well, why don't we just go ahead and flood the fucking shit, heal our own selves, and in our own communities?
To talk about this, you said you could use Prozac or you could use something else.
Pyrite.
Give it again, please.
Pyrite. So it's pyrite, like a piece of crystal. It's like it used to be called. It's also called fool's gold. And it's just a crystal. I mean, crystals, amethyst and rose quartz and clear quartz. All of those crystals have energy, and in some wellness spaces, right, that is an available tool to use as well. And so when we talk about wellness, it's really about, what do you want to prescribe for yourself? Like, that's my work when I have my private practice. I'm not here to tell you what to do. We're here to co-create your user's manual, and you figure out what works for you. And that's what we put in together. And so that your wellness is your own, this is your toolkit, and you do the work and you heal your own self, because we really, really can. Wow.
You're all about, well, you said co-creating a toolkit. So there may be someone who feels they need a tablet, but there are others who may feel like, I don't want to put those things into my body. And therefore, there may be other ways to go about helping to stabilize, your mind. Like, so for instance, with me, being on a plane can be very, very, very stressful. I, at one point in my life, was a serious pill popper, and I had addiction issues, went to rehab, did a lot. And so I want to get to the point that I take as little pills as possible, which is the way that I was actually raised. And so hearing you say that there may be other things that I can do other than having to take a pill at the onset of a flight to help deal with my anxiety issues, that's so powerful. But I can imagine that there are Black folks that don't have access to these conversations
100%,
and don't have access to medication, and they're just like all over the place.
100%.
Call them crazy.
100%. And you could do a breath work in your chair on a yoga mat for 10 minutes and reset your whole nervous system, like the whole thing.
Yeah, they say breathing. Yeah.
Right. But it's technique, right? But we can do it. And that's what the Healing Station does. We just teach folk, like, here's the information. Here's where you could get more information on the information, right? Which is also the other thing, right? Like, building our own knowledge, right? So it's not because Sin said, it's because you experienced it. It's because, that sister experienced it, or that brother experienced it. And that's how we each one pull one. And that what Alice Walker said, each one pull one? That was her, I think.
Yeah. So can you just, what are conductors?
Oh, so I'm a New Yorker. And I felt like a big girl when my mom let me take the train uptown for the first time, right? And first generation Jamaican parents don't let you go nowhere. So the fact that my mom's let me go on the train by myself and then let me go to Harlem, I was winning.
You was doing a lot.
What? So, just the New York City transit system, all of it is just magic to me, because I never understood it, right? I took the F train to the E train, and that was it. You know what I mean? And I always thought that the transit system was confusing to me. And so that's what kind of inspired even the logo, just letting wellness be a simple stop. Just come to the wellness station and get what you need. And so the conductors was really, of course, inspired by Harriet Tubman, because I do live on the path of the Underground Railroad. So she is always with me. And it just felt appropriate because it's project-based. So as a conductor, you come, you help lead the project, you get it to where it needs to go. And if it's something that you want to continue to work on, you have that space to do so. And if it's not, it's all good. But it gives people space to come in, to serve, to leave, because we're energetic beings and nothing is supposed to be forever, you know? And, you know, this project might be medicine for some people and they want to step away. And so conductors have the space to kind of work until they feel nourished and then do what they need to do.
Well, you certainly are a change maker. We have a segment every week where we talk to people who are making a difference in our society, and everything that I hear you saying is all about change making, and specifically for our people and our culture. So how can people help you to do more of what you're doing and to really broaden even your reach within our community, especially to our young people? And of course, again, looking at the idea of specifically targeting our men.
Great question. Well, I think the best way folks can support the work is twofold. One, there is always donations, right? Going to the healingstationny.org and making a donation so that we can increase our scholarship program. We started our first.
Well, let's go back. So the healingStation.org.
The healingstationny.org.
Okay.
The healingstationny.org. Thank you. So there's donations so that we can increase our scholarship program. The vision was to always have one in and one out. So meaning one full paid person and then a full scholarship person. And we did that. We have 6 cohort members for our trauma-informed BIPOC yoga teacher training. And women from all over the country are doing a trauma-informed yogic approach so that they can hold space for their own bodies and hold space for the community when they do this work. And also copying us, modeling us, like start your own man-child project, start your own teacher training, start your own movement training, start your own healing circles. Like just, you like the idea, then go ahead and do that too. Wow. You know, it's like the direct sales of healing, you know, like steal it all, you know, take it. It's there for the healing. Because that's the only way that we're going to heal, when we do it ourselves and when we do it in community. I like that.
Just want to say, you know, we really want to thank you for the work you do and the way you make it plain, like, you know what I'm saying? You're relatable.
Yes.
Like that's what I love about everything. I love about us as Black people. Like we able to break some, because I've heard a lot of Europeans talk about mental health and I've never really felt connected, but just listening to you talk it sounds like somebody that's from my block. 100. You know, and breaking it down to me and making me feel like this is for us. This is something that we need to be involved in. We don't have to lose our culture. We don't have to be stiff. We can have the same hip hop culture. We can talk like we want to talk, look like we want to look. We can have dope names that nobody can pronounce when we're young.
Yep, dope names in 3 degrees. You know what I mean?
And we can just be dope, man. And we can be fabulous and brilliant at the same time. So I just want to say thank you and heal.
We are fabulous. We are healed. We are dope. We are all those things. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Thank you so much, Syntyche, for being with us today. We appreciate you for all that you've imparted on us. And certainly you are a friend as street politicians. Anything that we can do to be of assistance to you, this is your home.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Many blessings.
Thank you.
Many blessings.
That's how we own it.
Look, these interviews were so amazing today. Like I've learned so much. And the thing about it was 2 completely different personalities and energies, but they both gave you that feeling like you wanted to talk to them. You know what I'm saying? You wanted to talk to Anita. Was just amazing. Her whole energy she seemed like a healer. Like she seemed like she was actually literally born to do this work. Just everything about her and the way she just communicated just make you feel comfortable talking to her.
Yeah. I found myself being like that maybe she could help to process some of the confusion and concerns that we have about just the world.
Well,
I like Anita. I really do.
I do too. And I like Syntyche too. Syntyche is dope because she just sound like the girl from the block that knew all the stuff. You know what I'm saying? And she was able to break it down to you and like, oh, okay, that's what they were saying.
She knew all this stuff.
She knew all the stuff and she just broke it down to you, and she brought it back to the hood and gave it to the hood the way that they can receive it. You know, so there's so many different entry points, and all of them, you know, serve a real purpose, man. And that brings me to
with Black people, you know, we need lots of different ways to capture our attention when you start talking about healing, because we run away from that. Other communities, and particularly the white community, white society, if you will, they really have adopted the idea of self-care and healing. And it's not something that Black people have been taught, and I guess the stigma of it is on us, but we're starting to break it down. You're starting to hear more men talking about going to therapy. And I think, you know, to your point, the work that Charlemagne is doing today, it seems like, okay, this is something cool. He's our friend and it's cool. But later in life, he's going to have Deepak Chopra sort of, what do you call it? There'll be people that will remember him.
Recognition, yes.
Recognition. That's the word.
Well, he's going to be one of the innovators of mental health for our culture.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So, yes. I just don't get why and how we've allowed ourselves to separate from mental health for so long, to not acknowledge
mental awareness, mental health awareness, right.
Mental health, just not acknowledge that we actually deal, like we of all people should know that we dealing with mental health issues, right? Because all of the things that we've dealt with throughout history, there's no way that we can be 100% sane.
Right.
It's just impossible, you know, and just listening just over the last few months, I've been taking the time to just assess myself, you know, just listening and then saying, damn, I never even knew that was trauma. I never even knew that. I just felt I had to be strong. I had to go through it. You know, I'm good. I'm always good. And I never really identified with just what I went through in prison, what I went through in solitary confinement, what I went through the process to get to prison, what I went through coming home from prison, trying to, you know, rebuild life. It's so many different, this is my childhood, the things I went through in my family, just understanding those things now and saying, damn, I really have to have some level of mental health issues. And, you know, and that was one of the things, like how I just don't get how we've allowed ourselves to not understand that for so long. And I'm glad that we get into where it's becoming something that, you know, is focused upon in our communities and in our culture right now. But I really just was really confused, like, damn, we should have been got this, you know. And then the second thing was something that you said, you know, and it's a thing. And I also, and it goes along with the same theme. I don't get how we've allowed ourselves as Black men and Black women to be divided by our enemy, right? There are people who focus on certain things and different things. It's not even different things. Like, how are we allowing the fact that a Black woman wants to speak up about Black women issues make men feel like it threatens our existence? Right? And vice versa sometimes. So it goes both ways. I don't even understand how those things are even a problem, right? Like, I don't even understand how we can't see that, we are dealing with the same exact problems. We dealing with the same struggles. We in the same communities, dealing with everything alike. How are we allowing ourselves to be divided by the same things that's tearing each of us apart individually?
Mm-hmm.
How do we don't see that those are things that we need to unify around. How do we don't see that when a Black woman sees that something is harming her, something is detrimental to her, and she speaks up about it, that our job as Black men is to make sure that right there, that she's safe in that space, right? And vice versa. When Black men say, yeah, we feel this way, why is there this level of just like tug of war? I just really don't get it.
You know what? I think it's for another show, right? To talk about the depth of all of the things that we are experiencing. I think if this show in itself is not, we need many different types of people to help us understand the backlash, if you will, and sort of like the residue of being enslaved and what that has done to our people, our communities, our minds, our culture, our relationship between the man and woman. None of this that you're expressing is by chance. All of it is a part of a design. Because if we are mentally whole, if we have a sense of stability, if we have unity in terms of our understanding of what has happened to us and where we need to go and how we need to operate in order to go forward, if we can stop and listen to one another and respect our individual issues and then the collective need for work and reconciliation, if we can do all of that, we would be the most powerful, I want to say entity, perhaps being Black is an entity, a thing in our society. And there are forces that know it. They know it. And that's why our music, it keeps the things that's celebrated about our music are things that keeps us dumbed down. Our schools, the way that we're educated, the way that our communities are designed, it's been done that way because there is a force that understands the power of this thing that's on our skin, this melanin, this color that other people do not have. And so, it's always, for me, fascinating when we try to hone in and begin to focus on our differences, not from a place of difference, but from a place of love. So I think that's why, but it takes people who are bold, like Anita, like Syntyche, to step out and say, I'm going to start the process, no matter whether, when you hear Anita saying, I knew I heard voices and my mother affirmed me rather than made me feel guilty or negative. Wow, like what that would be like for so many young Black girls and boys who have a talent that their parents feed it rather than tear it apart because they don't understand it. That's what I think.
That's an amazing thought. And I share those sentiments, which is rare. We usually don't agree.
We do agree a lot more than we don't.
Not more than we don't. Lately. But at one point, I guess
the process.
It's so much bullshit we dealing with.
But I think also we've agreed that there are certain things that we should just not even deal with. So therefore, we don't have those issues.
Shit that we don't agree with. We find the shit we agree on and we leave the rest of the shit alone. And with that said, we've come to the end of another show. Thank you all for making us the #1 show in the world. We appreciate it. Street Politicians.
It makes me laugh, but it better be real.
It's real, because we ain't taking nothing else. We're moving into our second season on the Black Effect Network. So we want to thank y'all for continuing to support us. If you have any ideas for shows, if you want to tell us off, if you hate us, you love us,
don't tell me if you hate me. I got enough.
Listen, I need it. The hate is fuel.
Yeah, I don't need it.
Please.
I have enough of it.
Listen, fuel. I need the fuel. So just let us know. You can follow us on Instagram at Street Politicians Pod. You on our YouTube page. Make sure that you go to Our Women TV to watch the show. You can find us on the Black Effect Network or anywhere else where you want to hear your favorite podcast. So with that said, I'm not going to always be right. Tamika's not going to always be wrong, but we will both always be authentic.
Always, always, always. Peace.
Peace.
That's how we own it.
Listen to Street Politicians on the Black Effect Network on iHeartRadio.
And catch us every single Wednesday for the video version of Street Politicians on iWomen.tv.